the whole premise of a toolbox is we all have toolboxes, and within our toolbox we have different tools to deal with different situations, and kids love that premise. So I always tease them and say, you're not going to use the same tool for the same problem all the time, or it's not going to fit. Every tool is not going to fit for the same situation. So our example would be, okay, do you have a toolbox at home? And kids will say yes. And okay, what kind of tools are in those toolboxes? So do you have a toolbox, Richard?
Yes.
What's in your toolbox?
Wrenches and screwdrivers and cutting tools and...
Okay. Now, Vicky, would you use a screwdriver to cut down a tree?
No, that definitely wouldn't work.
No. And so the same as our problem-solving tools. We teach them that you're not going to use the same tools for every situation because they're not going to fit for every situation. And so there's a variety of tools, and you have to pick the best one that's going to solve the problem. And so, and we talk about the fact that you have to think about it. So you need to take time. So my example is always to the kids, when the TV goes fuzzy and you can't see the picture, that's what your brain is like when you're upset. You can't get a clear picture of the problem, so you need to calm down so that you can then be able to make a good decision with a clear picture of the problem. So that's really, and so it really is just about stopping and thinking and then deciding on what the best tool is. And all of the teachers and parents have these, so they wear it on a lanyard on their neck because remember, our goal is to have independent problem solvers. So when a child comes up, that lovely tattling word that people love to say, my bias, and I'll be honest, is that when a child is tattling, it just means they're lacking a skill. And so when they're coming to, they really don't have a skill and they need help. So when a child comes up and says, Johnny hit me, our very first response, typically as teachers and as parents, is to intervene and step in and tell them what to do. We don't want to do that. So our very first thing to say is, what tool did you use to solve that problem? 90% of the time they'll say, oh, I didn't use a tool, and then they'll go. But if they don't know what tool to use, or some kids will say, I am using a tool, I'm coming to ask you for help. So then when they say that, then you take them through the problem solving steps. Okay, how are you feeling? What are you going to do to calm down? And then what can we do to solve the problem? So it's that teachable moment. The other half of the kids will say, I forgot to use a tool. Never mind, I know what to do. And they'll go. But if they need help, all of the tools are there as visuals. And they're all visuals that kids will get the connections as to what they are. And they can work through, what tool do I need to use? And that's what this one is your toolbox. And when I was saying, you can't pick, parents are always saying to us, okay, we don't like the tool ignoring. The kids are ignoring us. No, it's not okay to say, I'm in the middle of watching my favorite TV show and your mom calls you for dinner, you don't get to pick the tool of ignoring. We had a little boy who said, I used the tool ignoring, Mrs. Englund, it got me in trouble. Okay, let's go back. So it's not about free for all here. There is some methodology behind it. So it is about, obviously, we will encourage kids to use talk it out. And talk it out is when you use an I statement. So I feel angry when you don't do this. Could you please? So we're teaching kids to be able to acknowledge how they feel because they own the feeling regardless of what someone else has chosen to do. They need to talk about what the person did so that the person has a chance to change it, and then they need to say what they need. So that's what we would encourage them to start with. And then as parents, we want you to use that same language to be able to say, I feel frustrated when you're not listening to me. Could you please listen? I feel frustrated when you don't bring your laundry down. Could you please bring your laundry? So it starts that communication. It's not about blame. It's not about shame. It's about communication. And then we go into the whole tools that go along with it. So being able to talk about. So we do, in our tools, we would do talk it out. But there are situations where when kids, and you'll want this as parents, when kids are with other kids who are making poor choices, you have the power and the choice and the control to walk away. You can encourage your friends to make better choices, but if your friends don't make better choices, you're ultimately responsible for yourself and you need to walk away. Mm-hmm. Ignoring is a great sibling tool. So when your brother's trying to push every button you got, which never happens, right?
Oh, no.
No, never. So ignoring is about being able to ignore when someone's talking on the carpet, or when what we really want is for kids not to start to react to everything. So Richard, you're walking down the hall and someone makes fun of your sweater. You don't always have to react, right? You could choose to ignore, or when your little brother touches stuff that you don't want him to touch, you can ignore it. And we talk about that power. So if you ignore someone, the reason when you get upset, you're giving them all that power. If you ignore them, you're still in control. But one of the things we talk about in that's critical as parents to teach is when you choose to use a tool of ignore, you don't later get to come back and say, do you know that so-and-so did this to me? Because if you've chosen to ignore, that's the tool you chose to use. And if you're not happy with the results, then you need to pick a different tool. Right? You don't get to come then. And so where this can cause problems is when I'm outside playing and I'm really mad at my brother because he did something, but I've chosen to ignore him. And then I come in the house 45 minutes later and I tell you and want you to do something. But at the time, because I wanted to still play, I chose to ignore. And so that's the choice you told. That's the choice you made. And now it's, you want to get your brother into trouble. And that's always the question you have to ask yourself is what's the point behind it? If it was really a big deal, I would have come in from that play. Right? So it's that. And then there's compromise and there's chance. So chance is when you flip a coin, vote, all those things in life that we do. And then apologize. And the last one we encourage, unless someone's hurt or something's dangerous, is ask for help. So we really want them to try and solve problems on their own first before they come and ask a grown-up for help, because one of the challenges that teachers have in schools is the whole tattling, and it can be a social issue for kids when they consistently go to an adult, but it's really that teachable moment that they need extra help. And so that's there. And then we have just the easy thing. Well, I'll make sure you get a second one since you're a reader. So we have the bookmark so that it's easy travel, so that you know what, you don't have to take all of this with you, but you have a bookmark. Or in my house, the door, I don't know about everybody else, but leaving our house is always a challenge. You know, there's 5. So reminding ourselves to what the tools are and stopping and thinking